Hey you, and welcome. In this video, we will learn about HTML form elements. So let's dive right into it. One of the key features of HTML is you can render a form element, which will allow a user to interact with your website, provide the data, and you can do something with that data if you want to work with JavaScript later on. All right. So how do we render a form? For that, I'm going to take away everything in my body. Or if you want, like, you know what, just for more practice, let's go to the new file that we have, the file.html. And to open this file on the browser, I will just say /file.html in my browser. And it's empty. Reason for that is because there is no HTML provided. So we'll do the same thing just to get more practice into this. I'll do Command-Shift-P, insert snippet, HTML doc, and I will write that documentation for me, or the code for me. And I'll just say h1 hello world just to render it out, save, and I have to refresh my browser, and now it should work just fine. Great. With that working, let's start with our form. So first things first, introducing to you the form tag. A form tag in HTML is exactly what it says. It's a form. Anything inside it will need to be collecting some kind of data, and when the data is collected, we can provide some kind of attribute like action, and you can, in the action, you can say take this action, provide this data, and send it to somewhere else. So that's another attribute that we can work with when we work with JavaScript. And that's what form tag would do for us. Inside the form tag, we will work with the input tag, so less than sign input. And this is a self-closing tag, so I'll have to do / greater than sign. Again, the space doesn't really matter here, but I will add that for readability purposes. So if I press enter right now or save, this should add a text input for me and I can write into it. So right away, we have some results coming in. Let's make some changes to it. I do want my input to have a label, so you know what you're supposed to provide in there. Right now it's just a text input, and to provide a label, we will use a label tag inside the form. And this is not a self-closing tag, so we do have to provide a closing tag for label and call this first name, save. There we are. So now I can see that first name needs to be provided for the text input. I can also provide a line break at the end of it, so br/. If I want my label to be above, text input to be under, that's perfectly fine. Now notice that it assumes, the browser assumed that me providing input would just mean that this is the text input. Well, what if I want it to be a number input or an email input? How can I change that? That's where the attribute type comes in handy. So for an input, if I provide a type attribute, notice that our IDE is helping us out here, and it knows HTML really well. So it's telling us, is it a button type? Is it a checkbox that you're trying to render? Or is it a date? So there's tons of options for us to work with. Let's just put text again, like so, save, and nothing changes. Let's copy this over, paste it, and let's change it to button. That's how button would look. All right, let's change it to checkbox. That's how checkbox will look. And if I click it, it does do the check on and off, and the button does have the animation, which is all built into the browser. Let's do one more, like number. And if I try to type any words in there, I'm typing right now, it's not doing that. But if I put numbers, that works okay. So it's good for a form to be clean, where you can say this is only numbers are allowed in this input, whereas only text is allowed in this input. That's good for that. So these attributes are very valuable. One more attribute I'll show you is placeholder, where you can say enter first name ... save, and you can see how my text input now has a bit more value. So I don't really need label. If I want to take it away, that's fine. However, for accessibility purposes, I will say always keep the label there, and that's fine. All right. Next, for every form, we will need a button to submit the form entries, and that comes from input type submit. Oops, not like this. Submit, self-closing tag, and save. There we are. It automatically rendered a button for us, and it's a submit button. If I click it, it refreshes my browser, and it's trying to submit. Great, our form is already looking good. Let's make a few more different kind of inputs that we can work with. So I'll just put a line break at the end of all of these tags to make sure that they are rendering on a new line, like so. There we are. Oh, submit doesn't really need it. All right, save that. That way we know you're on a different line. Form tag doesn't automatically does that, and input is not something that is a display block. We'll talk about displays in the CSS tutorials. All right, let's try to work with a select input. So there is a select tag, And the select tag is a drop down where you click on it and it gives you a bunch of options that are pre-built. Right now, if you were to write a text, you can make errors. Humans make errors. And if you were to say you can only select 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4, that's where select comes in. And select will take another tag as an option, which is option. And the option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4, we can change the values 2, 3, 4, like so. And you would notice that, oh, let's put a BR tag at the end. There we are. Yeah, you notice that it's a drop-down list. And if I click onto it, I can only select 1 out of whichever one you provide me. That means I'm controlling the input a lot more, again, making the user experience better and the data a little better too. There is another type of input that does exactly the same thing, but in a different UI, the radio button. So let's try and create our radio button, which will allow us to select 1 out of many. In order to do so, I will start writing input tag, self-closing, and provided the type of radio. And this will have many options, not just one, so we'll provide 3 options. They'll all be type of radio. Let's save. And this is how radio button looks. Not too friendly at first. And of course, I'm allowed to select many. So how do we make it that it only selects 1? And also I want labels. So let's start with working with labels first. To make the label work, I have to provide label tag and call this 1, 2, and 3. Ooh, that didn't work. 2, 3, save. So that works okay. And then I also have to make it so that it allows me to only select 1, not many. And in order to do so, we have to group these inputs into 1. And to do so, we have to pass an attribute called name for this input. And we can name it group 1, group-1. Copy that name attribute, pass it to all the other radio buttons. There we are. Save. And now if we select it, we can only select 1 out of 3. So that's how radio button would work. Next, let's take a look at date input. So I'll type input, type date, self-closing tag, save. And you would notice that the browser allows me to select a date out of a date picker without having to do too much work. I will add a line break so that I can see them on new line. There we are. One more I want to show is the file type. This will allow me to upload a file from my computer. Clicking on choose file will take the file and then it will provide the file to my form, and that I can do something with that to upload that to cloud, to servers, to anywhere. Great, those are all the tags I wanted to show for the form. I'll see you all in the next video.